welcome to another episode of Switch Movies. Today's theme is movies adapted from books, and because of today's theme, I've asked one of my favourite people in the whole world to come on and be a guest in this episode. My lovely friend from also America, but more specifically Texas, my lovely girl Brittany. Hi, Brittany.
Hi.
Brittany, she is half movie reviewer, half book reviewer. So she is the perfect person to talk about both mediums in this episode. And of course, Ben is still here because that's his job, to be here.
Yeah, I'm just still here.
Yeah,
I'm always to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Yeah, no, I gave all this stuff to Brittany.
It's a little bit.
Hey, I'm the guest.
Exactly. Besides, you've had how many decent intros have I given you over the last couple months, Ben?
Hey, you know what? Champion and Hall of Famer will never get old, so.
I know. Battle Royale should be interesting. I'm gonna have to get really creative, like WWE style intros, just to make it interesting. So the first movie we are talking about today is No Country for Old Men. And this film was recommended for me to watch by Ben. It's a 2007 American neo-Western crime thriller film directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. And it, obviously, is based on a book, hence the reason why it's on this list. Brittany, can you tell us a little bit about the book first?
So, I had never read this book. I had never seen this movie either. You guys got me on new things for both of the things we're talking about today. So, this book is written by Cormac McCarthy, who I have not read anything by before, so this was an adventure for a new author for me. To do a quick review, I really liked the plot. I hated the writing style. And the writing style actually translated to screen pretty accurately, but I liked it better on screen, which we'll get into more when we talk about the movie. But so the writing style, something that really bothers me about this is the fact that there's no quotations around dialogue. So everything just flows on the page without like breaks. And it makes it really hard to figure out like who's talking. And when you switch perspectives, because we do have multiple perspectives in the book, similar to how you get it on screen in the movie, I would like be 3 paragraphs down and be like, wait, who's talking here? Because it wouldn't say the name of the person is talking and it wouldn't have quotation marks. So that was really off-putting and frustrating for me. But besides that, I enjoyed the plot. Just the writing didn't jive with me so much.
How accurate to the book is the film?
Pretty accurate, actually. It followed the main beats of the story pretty closely. There's a couple things they change in the movie. Some things are plot, some things are not, and I have gripes about some of them. But overall, it's actually a fairly accurate book-to-movie adaptation, like all the way from tone to plot to characters.
Okay, interesting. So, Ben, this was your pick for me to watch, obviously, because it was his pick for me. That means I haven't watched it. So why did you pick this movie for me, and what do you like about it?
Well, when you go from book to movie adaptations, like the movie world is your oyster. There's so many great ones. Jurassic Park, Jaws, like you could go on forever with like book to movie adaptations. But I just feel like this, I remember people finding out that it was a book after it won the Oscar, I think, because it won Best Adapted Screenplay. It didn't win Best Original Screenplay. And so that was, I know it was a very popular book, but, for most of the world, they didn't know it was a book. So getting that information, I'm sure, like, the book sales shot up. And I even own this book. I just haven't read it. I haven't gotten around to it. I need to read it. But this movie it shocked me with how little it happens, but how much happens and how it ends, and the lack of dialogue. And then just the characters are so great, with Llewellyn Moss just being this kind of no-nonsense but very cool person. Like, he just accepts life for what it is, and he's just going to take it as it comes. And then Tommy Lee Jones is kind of the title character, No Country for Old Men, and he's kind of taking a step back and realizing how the world is changing in front of him. And all of his monologues are great. And I've listened to his final monologue like 40 times trying to figure out what the heck it means. And then Javier Bardem, this was kind of his American coming out party, and just he's one of the scariest, most frightening villains to ever be put on screen. And that gas station scene is just the first time I watched it, I was sweating because I didn't know what was going to happen. But everything about this movie just sings to me, and the fact that there's no score, there's no music. And you really feel that in the movie, and that's so rare in movies. It's just like they don't depend on anything besides atmosphere to drive everything about this movie, and it works. It works perfectly. And there's no huge exposition dumps. There's no like, well, we need to do this to get this, and then, oh, what was that plan again? Let me explain it for you. No, it's just things happening, and the way it unfolds, like, it can be frustrating for people, like, oh, this character died and I didn't get to see it. Oh, they didn't have that main confrontation that I wanted to see. They didn't have this big gunfight. You could think it's like leading. Oh, it's coming to a head. Nope, it's not. Like it just fades out, and that's what I like about it. And it's honestly the first time I watched it, I was like, wait, what? No. But the second and third and ninth and 10th time I watched it, I've grown to love this movie so much, and everything about this is amazing, and I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm a big fan of the Coen brothers, and I think I've watched all their movies, but this might be their best, and that's saying a lot with how good they've been over the years. But this was perfect.
Wow, that's quite the raving review. So you completely agree with it being nominated for an Oscar then?
Yeah, I think it won, didn't it? Didn't it win Best Picture? Or did There Will Be Blood win?
Let's see. It won 4 awards at the 80th Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Directors, Best Supporting Actor for Bardem, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I finally watched There Will Be Blood, and I know like those were the two big ones of that year. And there's a lot of similarities between them of like the setting, and it's in Texas. And literally, there's a scene in No Country for Old Men where they had to film the next day because the oil burning scene in There Will Be Blood was happening a few miles away, and you could see the smoke from the oil spire. Like that's how close they were being filmed, and like at the same time in the same location. And so they had to move. I think it was the highway scene when he kills the first time you see the air gun. I think that was the scene where they had to film the day after and like wait for all the oil smoke to clear. Don't quote me on that fact, but I know that that happened eventually in the movie. But finally seeing There Will Be Blood, I still think they made the right decision, which is very rare for the Academy. Green Book. But yeah, this is one of the few perfect movies in my opinion, and I say in my opinion because obviously it's all subjective. But I couldn't find an error in this movie. I mean, maybe there's like technical continuity errors somewhere. I'm sure like you could find goofs like on IMDb and stuff like that. But just the characters, the writing, just how it unfolds. I don't know. I'm ranting because this is one of my favorite movies. But yeah, what did you guys think about it? Both, I was so surprised when that was the first one that I brought up. I was like, oh yeah, No Country for Old Men. Have you seen that? And you said no. I was so surprised. So what did you think about it? And Brittany, since you read the book and watched the movie for the first time.
I'll let Ashleigh go first because I'm curious about her opinion.
I typically don't watch films that are nominated for Oscars. Very rarely do I, because most of the time I have the same opinion of all of them. And so it's like, you can just tell everybody can pretty much tell these days what's going to be nominated for an Oscar. I don't think anyone ever really gets surprised anymore. I mean, there might be the occasional like, oh, really? But yeah, so I'd never watched it. I had no plans to ever watch it. So thanks, Ben, for taking my No Country for Old Men virginity. That was great. Yeah, this kind of just solidifies why I don't watch Oscar-nominated films, because I found it boring as hell.
What is boring about it? How, like,
Everything.
you can not like it, that's fine, but I just boring? How? It's a chase movie, literally.
It took me 3 hours to watch a 2-hour film because I kept pausing it because I needed something to wake my brain up. I don't think it's a badly made film. You look at it and you can see that it is well made, and I can't say that the performances are bad because they're not. I just got absolutely nothing from the story. As I'm watching it, I'm like, of course this was nominated for an Oscar. It has all the things that are so typical in Oscar-nominated films. You have various people giving these ridiculously long monologues that make absolutely no sense, and you never really see a person doing that in reality. And I'm trying to listen, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell are they actually trying to say. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. When Josh Brolin's character gets killed, I didn't even know he got killed. I was so confused. We get past it, and I'm just like, wait, what happened? Wait, okay, some people are dead. Wait, is he dead? Wait, is he not dead? Oh, okay, wait, what? And then it's not until we get to the end, and Barnum's character is confronting his wife, and then I'm like, oh, so he is dead. I'm like, oh, okay. And then the ending is so abrupt, and I finished it, and I just was like, thank God that's over.
So the part where the cop literally approaches his wife at the crime scene and she starts crying didn't give it away for you? Or the fact that the next scene they talk about him dying?
I could not get myself engrossed in this film, so I found it hard, really hard, to pay attention. It was a struggle. It was a genuine struggle. My brain kind of kept tuning out, even though I was trying so hard to focus. And even though, yeah, Tommy Lee Jones's character does walk up to her, I was still very confused. I'm like, because to me, the setup of it looked like it was a setup for like a fake out, because that happens in so many films. I'm like, is it one of those things where you're going to find out at the very end that he actually survived and that she's just getting preemptively upset? And I'm like, or maybe her mother died. I don't know. And she didn't even seem like that nice a woman, so who really cares? But then it's just like finally confirmed ages later when I'm like, I'm so unsure of everything that is going on. And again, there's that end scene, and it's just another monologue, and then when that's over, there's another monologue, and I'm just like, this movie is just a whole bunch of monologues, which I find is very common in Oscar-nominated films. And then they always show the clips, and they're like, and so-and-so is nominated, and here's a clip of them doing a monologue. So, that's my take. Brittany, what did you think?
So, this is one of those movies, and books for that matter, that, like, the process of reading/watching them, like, in the middle of it, I was like, I'm not super enjoying this. I was kind of with Ashleigh with the, like, I can tell it's well made, the performances are phenomenal, all that. But now that I've had, like, a good week or two to sit on it, the more I enjoy it, especially as a book-to-movie adaptation, because it is very accurate. Ben, you're going to love the book when you eventually get to it, because the monologues are a key highlight in it, and there's a lot more of them in the book, and they're very significant.
You can figure out where they start and stop.
Right?
Yes,
so
actually,
weird, no quotation
because
marks.
the text is italicized in the monologues, and they're their own chapters, so they're very separate.
God. Oh, God.
So that was actually very accurate for the movie, and I think Javier's performance is stunning and phenomenal. It's probably one of the best, like, villain performances I've ever seen. In fact, I was reading some trivia about it, and the fact that his performance was recognized by, like, I forget the group, but it was some sort of psychology group saying that it was actually a very accurate performance for someone who's psychologically insane and, like, a psychopath, which I thought was really cool, especially the fact that he wanted to pass up this role because he didn't think he spoke English well enough, and then they were like, no, that's perfect. So I think his casting was phenomenal. I think the casting for all of this was phenomenal. Josh Brolin, I was a little hesitant about, but as we went on, he matched the character very well. But I think that's because I haven't watched a lot of Josh Brolin's old stuff. I've only watched more of his newer stuff. But overall, I think the themes, being set in Texas, the monologues and the slowness, especially for that time period, is dead on. Like, reading this book was so much fun for me, and because of the references, like they referenced Plano and Denton. I lived in Denton. I went to college in Denton. I'm in Plano every weekend. Like these are places I'm in frequently, so I know like the distance between them. I know, somewhat of the geography of them. So that was an interesting experience. And it does feel like a very Texan film, despite the fact that they did not film most of it in Texas. And Tommy Lee Jones actually convinced them to film some of it in Texas, but they weren't going to originally. So overall, I think it's like a really well done movie. Like I said, especially as a book to movie adaptation. And I think a lot of things Ashleigh complained about is actually accurate to what it was trying to do. Like these shocking deaths and things like that. Let me tell you, the death scene of Llewellyn dying, first of all, in the book, he has like a girl he picked up on the side of the road, like not in a sinister way, but just like he was trying to help her get from point A to point B. And so they're together and they both end up dying. And I'm just sitting here reading this in my break room at work, and I flip the page and it's like 12 hours later or something. They're like, the cops arrived on the scene and there were 2 dead bodies, and they start describing the bodies, and I was like, what? Excuse me? I literally had to like put my book down for a second, and if anybody was watching me in our break room was probably like, what the heck is wrong with her? So the feelings you get from those scenes in the book are very similar to what you're describing as your experience watching the movie, and was very similar to my experience watching the movie. I don't like the scene where the wife shows up at the hotel. I think it's good in the movie, but it's not accurate to the book. I like how they did it in the book a lot better. So her mom died. She went to the funeral, and she gets back from her funeral, and the sheriff is waiting for her. Tommy Lee Jones' character is waiting for her. Oh. And then, so earlier in the film, when he first comes to talk to her, does he come to talk to her in the film twice, right?
Yeah.
So he does that in the book too. The first time he comes, he's got his sheriff hat on, his cowboy hat on, whatever. He shows up to the door and he takes it off because that's a sign of respect, especially like here, you take your hat off when somebody opens the door or whatever. And she immediately thought that he was dead that time. And he's like, no. I'm just here to ask you questions. So then he shows up after her mom's funeral, goes to the front door and takes his hat off. And she's like sitting there waiting for him to like reassure her he's not dead, and he doesn't say anything, and then she just breaks down. And it's actually a really powerful scene in the book, and I liked it a lot. I'm kind of disappointed they just had her randomly show up at the hotel, which I'm assuming there's an undone scene that's not like they didn't film her getting a call to get there, but it just felt kind of disjointed that like, oh, he died, and then all of a sudden she's there. How'd she know to get there? Like, but it's part of the slowness of the film. And
that's how the Mexican mafia knew how to get there, is because they were told to go to El Paso, and because the guy takes the mom's luggage, like, oh, let me help you with your luggage. Where are you guys going? She's like, we're going to El Paso. I don't know anybody. You know how many people I know in El Paso? This many. The mom character is so great. She's so awful, but she's so funny. But that's how like she knows to go to that hotel, and yeah. But that would be a much. I like that. The non-reassuring, like the waiting, because it seems very like the movie, so that would have been good too.
Yeah, and I think that the coin flipping was really good too. That was actually something I didn't notice a lot in the book. I think they did it once or twice in the book, but everything in the book is written in such a even tone, like nothing's like building up to a certain point, just like, Ben, you were saying with the movie, nothing builds up to a point that breaks or that like climaxes or anything. The tone in the book is very similar. So if you're reading pretty quickly or kind of blowing through it, you don't know what scenes are significant or not, because you're just like getting through it, and then you're like, wait a second, you have to like reread the paragraph, which I feel like the movie has a very similar feel to that. So when he did the coin flip things, and he had that very significant moment with the wife at the end of the movie, which is identical to the end of the book, I was like, why is this a thing? And then I watched the movie, and they emphasize it a lot more. I just think it's one of those stories that actually translates to screen a lot better than it did in the book and the way it was written, which is rare. I usually prefer the book over the movie.
I'm just so interested to learn that how faithful of an adaptation is, because it's so rare that Hollywood ever sticks to majority of what the book does. And I guess in this case they just looked at it and said, this is just perfectly written as it is, that it can equally be a script. It's the only difference is it's like, we actually have to make it clear who speaks what lines. But there are little things that I did like. I mean, it didn't change my overall feelings towards the film, but I did like Josh Brolin's character just because he's a very proactive person, and I like proactive characters. People who, they don't just sit and moan and whine. He's just immediately gets stuff done. You know, it's just like, oh, I'm injured, okay, I'm gonna take care of my injury. It's like, oh, well, you know, this happened, okay, I'm gonna do this. He's just step by step, and he's always, whenever he's on screen, he's never, even if he's quiet, you can see that he's thinking, he's planning, he's figuring out his next move, his next step. So he's already like 10 steps ahead of himself. So he always has an exit plan. And there were just such little things that if you were watching any other film, like when he's hiding the money in the vent, if this was any other film, you'd be yelling at the person going, come on, everybody knows to check the vent, there's nothing original about that that's easily going to be found. He goes a step further and it's like, yeah, but I'm going to actually make sure you can't even see it in the vent. I'm like, oh, this guy's actually really smart. No,
So
like,
it's funny you bring up that scene, because that scene in the book, so they just jump to him having poles, right? And him just like pushing the poles to go through they don't show him getting those poles, right, in the movie?
No, they show.
They show him at a store asking for 10
Oh,
poles,
okay.
and he says,
I
no, you
forgot
have
That's
to
one of
have
my
10.
that's one of my favorite lines of the movie. He's like, "What kind of tent has the most poles?"
Oh, that's
Like,
right,
I don't
you're
know.
right.
He's like, "Well, let me buy a tent." Which one? One with the most poles. Like, it's so great. Like,
So this this movie is so book accurate that there are lines in the movie that are word for word from the book, which is really surprising to me because I was reading a little bit about the Coen brothers like writing process, because they did work on the screenplay for this movie, because I haven't seen a lot of Coen brother movies, don't come at me, but I was reading a little bit about their process, how their process of writing is very non-linear, and they just kind of like bounce around and go from idea to idea, and it's a very unique way of writing. So it surprises me that this translated so one-to-one from the book. That was just shocking to me. And something you mentioned, Ashleigh, with the fact that he's doing the taking care of his wounds step by step, especially Javier Bardem's character does the same thing. That was actually something that pissed me off in the book, because
Really?
it's the way it's written in the book. There's literally like 5 straight pages of he puts a thing in the car to blow up the car. Then he walks into the store through the broken window. Then he gets there's literally 5 pages of sentences started with, he does this. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't read any more of this. Like, as a reader, it was boring to me. I'm like, I get the point, and I feel like you could have done this in a much more engaging way. But like, it gets you into the head of the character, so I get that, but it was still frustrating to read. Like I said, that was something that played out on screen much better.
yeah, I was gonna say, reading it like that, it sounds like it's just kind of another day in the life for Javier Bardem and Josh Brolin. Like, they just have to do this, and it's not exciting, and it's not thrilling. Like, they know they're not gonna die. They're just injured, and they're just field dressing, and it's like, okay, now I gotta do this. Now I gotta blow up the car to distract everybody. Now I gotta walk into the pharmacy. Like, it's almost a chore. Not like, oh, I'm hurt, I have to do this. It's like, God, he shot me? Son of a bitch. I'm so annoyed.
Yeah, it's not written in a way where you get a lot of internal monologue. Like, there's almost no internal monologue in the book, which I really like inner monologues in books, personally. I like getting into the characters' heads, not just what they're doing. But like I said, it matches with the characters really well. It was just jarring as a reader.
I think that at least the difference in those moments comes through with the performance of how they each perform dealing with their injuries, and not so much how the injuries and how them treating them is enacted. Because Josh Brolin's character, he looks like he's in pain. He looks like he's trying to block out the pain. You know, he's a war veteran, so he knows how to just keep pushing forward. And he's thinking, okay, here's what I gotta do to treat this. Here's how I gotta hide while I'm trying to treat this. And he's got all that going. So he looks like a guy who's just trying to block out the distress and the pain just so he can get from A to B. And then you've got Javier Bardem's character, who I'm not at all surprised that you said that actual psychologist journals are saying he portrayed a psychopath perfectly, because he does portray psychopathy perfectly. That no emotion, no feeling, no nothing. Everything is mundane, basically, to a psychopath, except for when you are kind of killing people. It's the only form of interesting thing here. I mean, he kills a freaking pigeon for no reason. Like, that basically tells me, like, yeah, this guy's got issues. Well, he doesn't even manage to kill the pigeon, I don't think. But just the fact that he's just like, it's like, yep, injured, okay, I will go and do this. So it's very like how you say it's written in the book. It very much sounds like how the mind of a psychopath would actually work. It's very ... Even the way, just watching him in that hotel room treating his wounds, there's just no reaction out of him. It's all very nonchalant. There's no feeling towards it. I mean, he probably could have had his leg cut off and he still would have had the same reaction. It was interesting. Just that shot of him sitting naked on a toilet seat, tending to his leg. I'm just like, yeah, that's an interesting shot. That just sums it up. There's just no cares to be had from this man right there. So I think I mean, like I said, performances, you really can't fault them. Even I, who didn't enjoy the film, if someone said, oh my god, this was a terribly performed film, even I'd turn to the person and say, you freaking nuts. So...
Well, and another scene that's very similar to the treating of the wound scene that I didn't like it in the book, but I really liked it in the movie, was that gas station scene that you really liked, Ben. I hated that scene in the book, and it made me so mad. I'm literally sitting next to Steven on the couch, like, bitching to him about it, because I was like, this is so stupid. Because I'm reading the book, and he's just asking the cashier questions, and then he, like, just keeps repeating the questions for, like, 2 pages. I was like, oh my god, stop. But then in the movie, it's genius, and it comes across, like, so well.
I hated that scene. For that exact reason. Just the fact that it was just, he asks a question, he repeats the question, so then he asks the question again, so he repeats the question again. It's just this back and forth, and I'm just like, it's been 5 minutes, and we're just going around in a circle, and like, are we going anywhere with this?
That's the point. He's crazy. Like,
performance is phenomenal in that scene.
Because,
he just sells it so well.
Because up until that point, he'd done everything for a reason. Like, the cop he kills to escape. The guy he kills for his car. But this scene is where you really get into what kind of person he is. The guy didn't say anything wrong. He asked, are you from Dallas? Because that's where his license plate was. He's like, what business? Like, and just like that. Just he turns it on. And the guy, it doesn't matter what he would have said. Like, if he didn't marry into it, if he owned the gas station, if they weren't closing then, it does not matter. If that coin goes, what is it, tails? If it goes tails, that guy's dead. For no reason. He didn't annoy Javier Bardem. He didn't piss him off. He just talked to him. And that's what it is. It's just like, that's the unnerving part about it. Is that usually when you make small talk and someone's just like, okay, I'm just not in the mood to talk. That's it. But no, he keeps pressing it. And especially, like, I always laugh at his reaction when, like, he kind of chokes on his sunflower seeds. He's like, you married into it? Like, he's like, he's married his wife, and her parents happen to own the gas station. And it's just these little things that keep setting him off. And just for some reason, like, his crazy person brain, it's not going to work out for this guy if this coin doesn't flip in the right direction. And the guy slowly begins to realize it, and that's why he just, okay, hey, we're closing, by the way. It's like he will shut down the entire store to get out of this conversation. And I don't know, like, that's where you really begin to fear this person, is because he is relentless and doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, he'll move you out of his way, even if you're not in the way. Just like when he goes to the office building and the other guy's like, are you going to kill me? And he just slowly turns to him. I think for the first time kind of realizing he was there. Like he hadn't even been paying attention to him. He was just watching Stephen Root die on the floor. And then he's like, well, that depends. Do you see me? And then it cuts away and you're like, oh, that guy's dead too.
I mean, yeah, I don't hate anything to do with Bardem's character. It was just I didn't enjoy the dialogue, mostly just because it kind of kept going. But yeah, I totally see everything that you're saying. I mean, I can't see it. I have eyes. I mean, especially when, you know, he's just going, do you live, it's like, oh, that shack out the back, do you live there? And he's like, yes. I'm like, why would you say yes to that? You're clearly getting creepy vibes from this guy. Don't tell him where you live.
It's just the Southern hospitality.
That is very true. So can I talk about something they changed from the book that I absolutely hated and it really annoys me?
Absolutely.
There are no dead or injured dogs in the book. There are none. There are no dogs in the book whatsoever that I recall. And yet in the opening shots of this movie, you have a limping dog who's injured. And I just like tugged on my heartstrings immediately. And then he gets to the scene and there are dead dogs on the ground. And then later a dog chases him and he has to shoot it. Why? Why add that to the movie? Like, I get that it added like chase and like, I don't know, just danger to the scene, but it makes me really mad when source material does not have injured animals and then they choose to put it in the adaptation. It just bothers me.
That was such a persistent dog.
Right, what a good boy.
Like, it's just like, yeah, just go get him. And then the dog doesn't even hesitate at the water. It's like, oh, yeah, you went in the water, I'm going in the water too. And it's just like nearly, it's like, I swear, it looked like they were going towards rapids, which they didn't. And that dog's still going, and he's getting out of the water, and the dog's like, yeah, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. I'm like, oh my god, this dog is like the Energizer dog. It's almost as crazy as Javier Bardem's character.
I think that, like, the
especially
reason
they use Pitbull.
Yeah. Yeah. But just, like, I think the reason they did that is because, like, that scene is almost like a microcosm of the entire movie where he's running away and this relentless thing is chasing him, and he wins. Like, he gets down on one knee, unpacks the gun, dries it out, cleans it, checks it, and then right as the dog jumps on him, he manages to shoot it. And so as this movie's going along, like, that kind of set a precedent, like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Like, he's going to come out on top. He's going to... Like, Javier Bardem's crazy and unrelenting, but, you know, this guy's good too. So it's like a tiny little story within a story of, like, this one scene of a dog chasing a guy down a river, and you think it's going to go one way, and then it doesn't.
Well, why couldn't they have done that with a person? Why a dog?
Because I guess you already have Javier Bardem doing that stuff, so you can't really have another person doing it.
I can understand the reason, but I still don't like it.
I think it's unfortunate for pit bulls because it already adds to their already incorrectly bad reputation. So there's that.
That bothers me so much.
They're such beautiful dogs. They're actually not as violent as people claim they are. So that movie did not help their cause.
But that's my biggest gripe with the whole movie.
Of course it is. You're an animal lover. I was disappointed in Woody Harrelson's character, or at least his demise, just because he's smart. He kind of appears as smart as Javier Bardem's character because he's figured out how to catch everybody in such a short amount of time. He's caught up so quickly and they've all had such a head start. So he's obviously very smart. And I'm like, but you know this guy is completely insane. You're aware of it. You're telling other people he's insane and there's no getting away from him. Like, so why wouldn't you actively try to stay off his radar? Instead, you got on his radar and then you got killed by him. And I'm just like, I'm like, you know what? In the short time I knew you, I thought you were smarter than that. And now I'm just disappointed.
So I have a fun bit of trivia about Woody Harrelson in this movie, which I don't know if you guys know this or not. So you know Woody Harrelson's father is like a famous murderer, right?
No.
Yeah, he was like, was it a hitman? I don't remember the details, don't quote me. But he murdered a person back in the day and is like infamous for it. So the book actually references said murder. So it's very interesting that then Woody Harrelson is cast in this role because the book references indirectly the murder that his father did. Isn't that a weird little full thing?
That's crazy.
The things you don't know. I love movie trivia. The things you learn are just fascinating. So, obviously, Ben, you love this film, so I think I already know the answer. What rating do you give it out of 5?
Oh, it's an easy 5 out of 5, and I could defend Woody Harrelson's demise, but I'm just like defending this movie against both of you, so we can move on to the movie you picked.
Brittany, what do you give it out of 5?
I think from like a technical standpoint and a movie making standpoint, I would give it like a 4 out of 5, borderline like 4.5 out of 5, because I think it's an incredibly well made film and an incredibly acted film. Enjoyment wise, like personal enjoyment wise, like the subject matter of this movie doesn't intrigue me. Like if somebody just told me the plot of the story, I'd be like, not interested, thanks, which is why the book was never on my radar. But I don't regret watching it, and I do enjoy that I now have a reference for this film because it's so iconic, and I did enjoy pieces of it, and it is a very well done movie. But like from a personal enjoyment of the subject matter, I give it like a 3 out of 5.
And what would you give it as a book to movie adaptation?
Like a 4.5 out of 5. It's one of the most accurate book to movie adaptations I've ever watched.
That is a very high rating. That's very impressive.
Which is very different than the one we're about to talk about.
That's so true. It's funny because it's true. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence because I think it's a very well made film technically, and the performances are fantastic. I'm just not intrigued or captivated by the story or the actual anything that was really going on the screen. So for me, it's like a 2.5 out of 5. I'm just in the middle because I can see where it's good. I just don't really care. Okay, we're gonna go and have Ben let out his frustrations.
Okay, real quick, do you not like me? Because you have recommended Bloodfest and now this. And I can get into the director's history of what a piece of shit he is.
I have words about that.
And the fact that of all the movies, because he has made good movies objectively, he's made plenty of good movies, and of all the movies you make me pay for, so in some retrospective weird way, I'm supporting this person, you make me watch this giant bag of flaming dog shit that is 2.5 hours long, is the worst acted by great actors, whether what you want to think about Johnny Depp or not, is a good actor, is the most horribly edited, the worst screen production, green screen is hilarious. I've seen better from like the 1920s or at photoshopped Disneyland photos. There's a scene with twins, which is so poorly dubbed that they were just doing this. And I've seen anime dub look better and more realistic English than this movie does. Everything about this movie, you want to talk about bored? I was falling asleep sitting up. Sitting up watching this movie, I almost hit my head on my desk because I was falling asleep. That is not an exaggeration. This movie, it wasn't confusing, it was just boring. How do you have a movie about finding 9 books that reference the devil and resurrecting Satan? I don't give a shit. Oh, by the way, Lucifer's initials are LCF. Obvious much? You have to reference his every syllable as a... Oh, God.
Ash, you want to actually tell them what movie we're talking about?
Yeah, I would. That's a good place to start.
No, I'm going to make them guess from my rant.
Look, I genuinely didn't think you would hate it this much.
I didn't either. The plot sounded interesting. It could be, dumb fun. But it was so plotting and so needlessly long. Why was this over 2 hours? Because, why? Johnny,
it's only 2 hours if you take out the credits. Actually, less than that, probably.
There's 15 minutes of credits.
I love those credits.
Oh,
the
God.
Intro credits are 5 minutes by themselves with all the doors.
Oh.
I don't care. Still load it. So, the film that I picked for Ben to watch and loathe, apparently, was the 1999 film The Ninth Gate. I would really rather not mention the director's name because I don't like giving credence to people like that. I mean, just go look it up and you'll see who directed it. And it is based on the 1993 novel El Club Dumas, which, because it was originally written in Spanish by Arturo Perez Revertes, and obviously then translated to English. Well, they translate every book in every country. And I actually have a copy of it. It is over on my shelf. I've unfortunately only read 5 pages. I will get around to watching them all eventually. So we'll start with the, because Brittany's going to have some things to say, because I tried to tell her that the book and the movie are 2 vastly different things. I don't think she believed me when I said that. I don't think she believed how vast it was.
The movie is half accurate to the book.
Half.
So can I just dive in on the book?
Go for it.
Okay, so this book is called The Club Dumas. That is because, I'm assuming we're like spoiler heavy on this, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is called The Club Dumas. The premise of the book, which if you've seen The Ninth Gate, this will make no sense to you because the premise of the book is nothing like the movie, as Ashleigh has iterated. So it's called The Club Dumas. I think I keep calling it Club Dumas. It's Dumas. Because it's about a group of bibliophiles who, the main character is very similar to the movie. You know, he's hunting down these rare books, whatever, and so he comes into contact with a lot of people who are very passionate about rare books and are huge bibliophiles. And one of the plot lines in this book, a major plot line in this book, is following a found original copy, or not even an original copy, an original piece of the manuscript for the Three Musketeers. So, because of the subject matter, I, being the overachiever that I am, and because I've owned this beautiful copy of Three Musketeers for years and have never read it, decided to listen to this on an audiobook while I was reading Club Dumas. I have yet to finish this, but I got enough of it. So, another reason I picked that is not only because of the name and the subject matter, but because the plot of this book has characters directly paralleling the plot in The Three Musketeers. You have characters that are meant to be the Lady de Winter, who are meant to be Athos and Porthos and D'Artagnan. Like, they are complete mirror images because of some shenanigans that happen. So it's really important, in my opinion, to know the plot of The Three Musketeers to a pretty big detail to understand that. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did that, to understand the book. But the movie has no reference to the Club Dumas or any reference to Dumas or any of his works, let alone the Three Musketeers. They took all of that out of the movie.
So you're saying that the book is even more stupidly confusing than this stupidly confusing movie. That you have to read an Alexander Dumas novel, which is huge. Like, he's a great writer, but talk about taking your time as an author.
And the Club Dumas plot is only half the book. The other half is the 9 doors. It's called the 9 doors in the book, not the Ninth Gate. I understand why they changed the name. The Ninth Gate sounds much more ominous than 9 doors. The other plot line is, in the process of finding this manuscript and figuring that out, he stumbles across this book called The 9 Doors that is dealing with devil worship. And then he falls into the plot that you see mirrored in the movie. So, and they look like, my problem with the book is that these 2 plot lines, like, you're like assuming, oh, it's like any other story that has multiple plot lines going that seem like they don't match up, and then eventually they'll intertwine and you'll have some like cool things, right? No. They're completely separate plot lines that never line up or whatever. Like, the main character thinks they're going to line up, but then they don't. He just happens to be in the middle of 2 plots at the same time.
I think that they do to a degree, but I've seen this movie probably like 100 times, and Oof. I think that over the years, sometimes I would ask myself so many questions after watching it, and then I'd watch it again, and I'd notice something that I didn't notice before, and there's such subtle things. I mean, it's the whole theme of the film is to be very esoteric, and I think it is very that. And so if you really have to either watch it a lot of times, which obviously Ben is not going to do, so he's got me for that, or you just have to really try to pay close attention to everything that is happening around the main character. Because while you're following his journey, it's really about observing everything that's going on around him and how those things play into everything that kind of comes up. I mean, I've picked up on so many things over the years, and I started watching it again last night. Unfortunately, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, I've got to get up in like 5 hours, so I did not finish it. But even then, I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm catching on to things even quicker now, and then I still am finding another thing, and the fact that you can theorize for days certain elements to this film, I love when you can walk away and go, well, I think this leads to this, and this means this, and da-da-da-da-da. I love being able to do that. It's like, this film is like a really big riddle, and I like trying to have to solve it. Ben obviously doesn't.
I wrote down some notes. I started writing down notes. Like,
Note number 1, I'm going to kill Ashleigh for making me watch this.
Okay, I wrote 4 sentences down before I just stopped taking notes, because, like, I like to, be prepared for these things, and, like, this was good. I have 4 sentences. The production design is terrible. The set looks so fake. And I know that's why why the production design is terrible? Because they couldn't film in America because the director isn't allowed in America.
That is true. I was going to mention that if you didn't.
Yeah. The twin scene is so bad it's hilarious. The ADR is atrocious. Like, what was the point? What was the point in that? Oh, and another thing, when they're noticing the subtle differences of the different pages, he's like, oh, look at this subtle difference. There's 3 towers in this one, and there's 4 in this one. It's like, is this a highlights magazine where the differences are so incredibly obvious a 5-year-old could pick them up, and these book scholars that literally do this for a living can't pick this up? You had to have someone else come in and say, oh, well, there's another tower over there.
It's because for most of these scholars, they believe that there being 3 copies is a myth. They don't necessarily believe that there are 3. They believe that there's 1. And each person who has a copy believes that their copy is the true copy, and everything else is just, it's plagiarism. It's just, it's not real. And it's only really Corso who, because he's actually getting to see all 3 of them and noticing little things here and there, that he's kind of pointing out, people like, oh, so it's actually real. There are 3 of them. And he's like, yep, there are. So they're all fascinated to see the only 3 existing copies that are centuries old, which if you are, regardless of the subject matter of the books, if you are a person who is a collector of rare books, and especially first editions at that, you are going to have a huge appreciation for this. And it's interesting how there's a journey to the film, and each character has a different meaning to the story, and you're only going to get any of that if you're someone who is a fan and has studied this film as much as I have. Otherwise, you're going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it's kind of because each character represents something in their journey, and this is actually one thing that I don't know if you noticed or if you knew, but they were using the engravings in this film that are actually used in the Club Duma. And one thing that they actually did is they changed some of the illustrations of the actual character faces in the engravings. It was mostly that they were trying to have the characters in the film look like the characters in the engravings. And it was very specific characters because they're meant to symbolize something that is represented in these engravings, which is meant to be the whole point of what is going on. For example, I love that one. Like the
one from the book, and that's the one that they changed in the movie.
Yeah. That would be the 9th gate, which was the forgery. But I think it was the 3rd gate. No. Yes. Yeah, it was the third gate, and that one is the man walking the road with the knapsack, and there's a man with the bow and arrow, and so that was meant to be the twins translated that and says, venture too far and danger will descend from above, which literally 5 seconds later happens to Corso. That actually happens to him throughout the film. Danger from above tends to happen to him a lot. That's an ongoing theme. But if you look at the person in the engraving holding the arrow, it's this kind of half bald guy with a mustache, which is exactly the twins who gave him that warning. They're in the engraving. So there's a lot of that going on, which is actually quite cool. But
you should be able to notice this on the first viewing. Movies that depend on multiple viewings, like, you can get more interesting stuff out of it. Like, there's plenty of great movies. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Inception, but there's little stuff here and there. Even The Matrix, which is like a great movie, like, there's little stuff here and there that you notice throughout. But you shouldn't have to solely depend on multiple viewings to get like subtext out of a movie. Like, there should be, like, not easy to read for the audience, but it shouldn't be so discernible that, because half the movie is you staring at a book page, and so I'm supposed to pay attention to every single illustration that's shown. Like, it's poorly made. It's just bad filmmaking because he doesn't emphasize anything. It's just presented to you. It's just, okay, here's this, and then here's this really awkward sex scene, which is, like, distracting, and so you think it's going certain places, and I'm okay with, like, different left turns and, like, oh, this isn't really gonna happen. And then, oh, this person floated down a stairway. Are they an angel? I don't know. It could be. But when none of it is explained, none of it is put into context in any form, it's just, like, thrown at me. It's like taking a bucket of paint and just throwing it on a canvas, and you're expected to find art.
But but isn't that kind of how that is for some people? One person does look at a piece of artwork that is literally just someone threw paint at the wall, and one person's going to look at it and go, oh my god, someone literally just threw paint at the wall, and another person's going to go, oh my god, and I see this, and I see this. That's literally how art works. So it's exactly the same with this film, because I caught so many things initially, but because there's so much to take in, and there are so many layers, I just keep noticing them more and more as I go along. But there were so many things that I caught on right away. But of course, I started watching this when I was very, very young, so my little child mind was not really taking in most of those. So it wasn't until I got older that I could actually kind of appreciate some of the little goings on and stuff like that. But Brittany, what did you think of the film?
Where do I start? I agree with a lot of points Ben makes, and I can see a lot of points that Ashleigh makes. In looking at other people's reviews of this movie, it seems very polarizing. There are people in the camp of, this has a lot of layers, and this has, like, deeper meanings that you get each time you watch it. There was a lot of that. And then there's the people who are like, this is just stupid. And that seems to be the two main opinions that I saw in a lot of people. And I think I definitely fall in the camp of, this is dumb. A lot of that is translated from my feelings of the book, because the book, the first, like, good half of it, I was really enjoying, and I thought that it had some really good intrigue and some really good, like, world building and mystery building pieces. And then the more I read, the more I felt like the author thought that they were smarter than they were, is how I felt like it ended up being. And I think that the director of the movie built on that and definitely tweaked it and made it in some ways more straightforward, in some ways not. As someone who's very familiar with, like, occult storylines, I think nowadays that's something that we've seen a lot in movies and books and TV shows and everything. I think it's been done a lot. None of the storyline plot things were that new or interesting to me. You're essentially piecing together a spell to summon the devil. That's pretty basic, right? What I did find interesting about the book that I think the movie tried to do, and I think Ashleigh picked up on a lot of what it was trying to do, but I don't think it pulled it off quite well enough. I agree with Ben on that, is the portraits from the book being translated to screen and their significance. In the book, those are laid out for you and told to you very detailed, like what they mean and what's going on. And a big chunk of the book is spent on analyzing these pictures and their differences between them. And as a book lover, it was really interesting to hear the exposition in the book about different types of books and book collecting and what's important in books and why these 3 copies and how they weren't exact copies. They were just slightly tweaked. It's really tedious, but it was interesting to me personally, and I think they tried to do that in the film, but it got a little chunky. I think that the Lucifer, the girl being Lucifer thing was a little too on the nose and too thrown in your face in the movie. I'm a little annoyed about that. It was a lot more subtle in the book, to the point where I didn't pick up on it in the book until I started watching the movie and then reading people's reviews of it and being like, here's my theory, she's Lucifer, and I was like, that makes so much sense now. But I think the movie tried to,
I don't want to say his name, sorry.
I think that they put it too much in your face in the movie. There is no floating downstairs in the book. There is no glowing eyes, and there's no face shifting in the book. I think that was very goofy, in my opinion. Also, did you know that that's the director's wife?
What?
Yes.
Oh, no wonder she's such a bad actress.
Fun fact. She actually played the character from the book very well, because the character in the book is weirdly off-putting and just quiet, but in leaving out the Dumas things, they left out some really interesting pieces of her character. Her character in the book, she never gives her name. She goes by Irene Adler and parallels that character quite well, if you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler. So that was another layer to her character that was interesting in the book. Something I really hate about the way this book is written is that it's very clearly written by a man, in the way that women's bodies are described and the way that sex scenes are done. The sex scene in the movie, not in the book. There are other ones, though, that I'm going to talk about. So the woman that he ends up sleeping with first, the one whose husband hangs himself at the beginning of the movie, he is super objectifying of her. She's a very curvy woman in the book. She's very full figured, and he just fetishizes the shit out of that and describes it. There's whole pages describing this woman's body. I can tell you down to the minute detail what the women in this book look like. I can't tell you the first thing about what the men look like because of the way it's described. And the book also goes through this period where Corso compares himself to a rabbit constantly. He's a scared rabbit, and he is a calculating rabbit, and he is all that at the beginning of the book. And then as the book goes on, he starts referring to himself as a wolf, and he is a wolf looking at a set of poker cards, determining what his next move is. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Wow.
Not only that, but towards the end of the book, he starts sleeping with the Lucifer character, the Irene Adler, the director's wife character. He's sleeping with her pretty consistently, but the first time they try to sleep together, he can't get it up. And there is a 3-page detail comparison of how that's equivalent to a battlefield. It's rough, man. It's rough. I have never wanted to read about a flaccid penis in that way. It was unpleasant. Then they do end up sleeping together. Or no, they start sleeping together because later in the night she's sleeping and he finally can do the deed, and so therefore does it while she's sleeping, which is rape. She wakes up halfway through, very receptive to it. But before that point, not okay. I can understand why the director was drawn to this book. And then later in the story, he's talking about this character who's very young. She's 19, but looks 15, 16 is how she's described in the book. So that's already creepy. And he starts comparing her size in her sleep and her facial expressions and stuff to a little girl. He keeps comparing this woman he's sleeping with to a little girl. It's disturbing as hell, and I hated it with a passion. I liked how they adapted their relationship in the movie much better than how it went in the book.
How funny that all that stuff is in the book, so I can see why you're saying why the director was drawn to it. And yet, funny how that's all the stuff that he took out despite his personal history. It's like he wasn't trying to make it too obvious that he's a fucked up human being. Funny.
And one more comparison in my long monologue, as much as you love those, Ashleigh. The end of the book frustrated me so much because, so to briefly touch on the Dumas part of it, basically it turns out there's a secret club, that's the Club Dumas, and it's a bunch of people who are very important in the world, you know, financial advisors and actresses and like etc., who all get inducted into this Club Dumas by following this plot that the club sets up, where you like end up unknowingly being put into a Three Musketeers plot, which I thought was kind of fun, but the reveal was kind of lackluster. And then the other ending is the devil summoning part, right? Which in the movie doesn't work, but in the book it doesn't work even more spectacularly. So in the book, they're at the person's house, like the guy who's trying to do it house, Belkin. And Belkin's like out of his mind, has taken this drug, is like not listening to Corso at all. And it's interesting because a big part of the book is Corso being like, give me my money. Like that's his whole thing at the end. He's like, I need my money and I'm not leaving without it. And then in the movie, he's like, dude, I don't even want money. Like, I just want to leave. And I'm like, wait. And he's like pushing Belkin this whole time. And then eventually he just walks out of the room, out of the house, as Belkin's trying to do the summoning spell. And then he just walks into our girl's car. And then the book ends. You don't know if he summoned the devil. You don't know if he didn't. You don't know what happens. The book just ends.
I'm not sure. I want to finish reading that book now.
I prefer that ending better than what the movie did.
I don't disagree, but it was
My
still
favorite
frustrating.
scene, I will say the one good scene about this movie is that when Johnny Depp goes to the cafe and the blonde-haired dude is following him, waits all day in the cafe, comes out, he's gone, then like the guy pulls up and Johnny Depp runs down the steps to the river, runs down the steps, runs 10 feet, turns around, no one's chasing him, so he stops. He stops, breathes this huge sigh of relief, and he's like, whew, that was close. And then he like looks at the next set of steps that are right in front of him, and he starts walking up, and there's this big reveal musical clue, like, da-da-da, when the guy like comes to the next, I was like, it was 20 feet away, of course that's where you go if you're chasing, what? Why did you stop? Ugh. I did laugh a little bit at that scene, so that's the one bit of enjoyment I got about this movie, is that was the dumbest thing I had seen a movie character do in a long time. Just like legitimately run 15 feet and then be like, oh, woo, that was close, guys. And then just start walking.
The scene in the book is actually my favorite scene in the book because there's a really great quote. It's my favorite quote from the whole book. So the girl who's supposed to be Lucifer, this is your first clue that she's Lucifer, and I stupidly did not get it until I watched the movie. But she comes down the stairs. She walks down the stairs. She does not float.
Oh,
down
she doesn't float in really terrible firework?
She like runs and jumps and like basically takes this dude out like with some really cool moves, right? And Corso's like, where'd you learn to do that? And she's like, I once wrestled with an angel. He won, but I learned a few things. It's such a good quote, especially with the context of what her character is. It's so good. And that the only reason that dude exists, I don't know why he exists in the movie, because they took out the subplot or the half plot that he's involved in. He's supposed to be the one who's getting inducted into the Club Dumas. It's not Corso who's getting inducted into the Club Dumas. It's this other guy, and he's supposed to be playing like main character from the Three Musketeers, etc.
Just gets bludgeoned with a shoe.
I thought it was going to be Corso being inducted into the Club Dumas.
How about that? One of my favorite things about this entire film is actually the score. It is my favorite score in the whole entire world. It's actually my favorite. Wojciech Kilar's, may he rest in peace, is actually my favorite composer. And he also did the score to Bram Stoker's Dracula. So if you hear this and then you go and watch that, you can hear a lot of melody similarities in the two. And I love that score and I love this score. And I actually have it on my iPod. And so there are times where I'll just lay there and I'll just start listening to the music, especially the end credits melody. It's quite hypnotic for me. All the music in this film is very hypnotic, and even if I'm like not paying attention to the movie, I just close my eyes and listen to the music, and it's because it's very strong classical vibes. You can hear almost every instrument that's being played. It's very orchestra based, and I'm usually very keen on picking up the score, and sometimes I come across a film like, oh my god, this score does not go with this film at all. But in this, I'm just captivated by the music, and so that's why I'm just like, give me the score, and I listen to it almost all the time. If it comes on, I'm like, unless of course I'm in a boppy mood, in which case no, I won't be listening to that. It's not appropriate for my mood. It's a mood based thing, but it is my favorite score in the world.
I didn't mind the score. I liked the score like as its own thing, but I hated how music was used in this film. Like Ben mentioned, the musical cue on the stairs with that one character. There's multiple moments in this film where nothing's happening yet, but a musical cue is giving away what's about to happen, which is something that pisses me off in horror movies, let alone any other. So that really bothered me. Also, from a movie making standpoint, I absolutely abhorred the cinematography in this movie. I think it was atrocious. From a technical standpoint, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know if it's good from a technical point, but from a movie viewer, it was bad, and I did not enjoy it.
Like this, that's the thing is that I'm like, obviously I'm fine with you liking this movie, Ashley. Like, you can like whatever you want. And I do like that you can find layers to it. Like, there's always enjoyment in that. But this is the ugliest fucking movie. Like, this is legit just like, it's hard to look at. Like, I couldn't... Like, this movie should have started in Europe so the director could have, filmed on location. Like, once he goes to Europe, it gets okay because he's, he's not on, like, this tiny back lot that's made to look like New York City. Like, the Friends lot is better than this. It's just like How I Met Your Mother looks better than all the fake stuff that was filmed down the street from me, but was in New York City, looks better than this movie. And it, like, I couldn't get into it. Like, it looks so cheap and it looks so bad. And so right off the bat, I'm just totally taken out of it. And I mean, I'm not even a huge fan of Tarantino, but just like after I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the stuff he did to create Hollywood back in the 60s and 70s, like, do not watch those movies back to back, because Quentin Tarantino, like, changed all of Hollywood Boulevard and, like, shut down an entire highway to put only period accurate cars on it. Don't watch The Ninth Gate after you watch that movie, because it was so off-putting to look at that it just took me out of being invested in a movie. I was like, okay, this is a movie. Like, I'm not into this story at all, because, like, even the books, when that's the focus of it, every book looks like it was taken out of the Hogwarts library. And, like, it looks... Like, none of these, and especially what bothered me is that I know you're not supposed to crease a book, like, that devalues it. Someone told me that one time, and I just, like, one thing that bothered me is every time Johnny Depp turned a page, he would turn it and then crease it. Like, I have a book right here, like, he would do this and then do, like, push it down. And you're not, because it'll do this, like, it'll crease the back of it. And I know you're not supposed to do that, and so that bothered me as someone who's supposed to know the value of a book and not disturb it.
Well,
I realize they're like satanic books. Maybe they don't get damaged. Because they said that too. Because I was gonna say that they all look brand new, like they were just freshly printed, and they were smart enough to include that line. So the only other good thing is that the guy even says, like, "Oh, these books are a century old, but they look like they've been printed yesterday." And I'm glad they said that, because that would have been a major critique, because every single book looked like a set book and looked like it got freshly made.
Well, the reason why he can...
Read the hardcover, you have this little space in between the actual hardcover part and the binding, and I think that the creasing on hardcovers isn't as big of a deal because of that. Don't quote me on that. That's just my intuition.
Yeah, I mean, books... I don't think that we use as sturdy material anymore. Obviously, back in those days, they were using completely different material that was really it was supposed to last. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, you look at it, it's got a hardcover, the binding is quite solid. so it doesn't look like it's going to... I mean, the whole thing was put in a fire and it still wasn't completely burned. So for me, I'm just like, yeah, that is one tough book.
It's interesting you say that, Ashleigh, because that's something they actually focus on in the book, and it was something I found really interesting. I haven't fact-checked this from the book to see if it's actually accurate, but I'm pretty sure it's at least in the ballpark. But old books, like this one, I'm just going to keep holding it up because it's pretty. So old ones like this was printed in, it's very old. I don't remember when, I believe sometime in the 1800s. These are made, like Ashleigh said, to last. Books that are printed nowadays are only meant to last about 60 years, which when I read that, I was like, why do I collect books? Why do I buy them when they're just going to deteriorate in 60 years? So there is a distinct difference between printing this and printing this.
Yeah, I mean, it also goes into, I like when, I wish that they kind of touched on it a little more, but then it would have completely not fit into the film, but it's when the twins, who obviously have forged, we find out that they have forged the last engraving in the book. And they're talking about how forgeries are very difficult, especially a book like that. The older they are, the harder they are to forge, because you have to find the right type of paper, the right type of binding, the right type of ink. Otherwise, it's not going to be authentic. And they managed to pull it off, and it's like, I don't know whether they were really trying to convince him that it's authentic, or if they were almost saying that in a, like, boasting way, like, this is how good we are at forgeries, because you can't tell it's a forgery, nobody can tell it's a forgery, but it's a forgery because we did it.
So Ben, I know you mentioned that the ADR was bad. Did you know the director voices one of those twins, and that's why the ADR is bad?
That's why, I'm almost mad about how poorly this movie was made, because, that's a cool scene that I didn't pick up on. I didn't pick up on that because I was so distracted by the fucking twins, and that it was so obviously, green screen, when it, pans over and you can see the film change. You can literally see the change in the thing, and it's like, oh, cut. And it's like, you don't need twins in that scene. Just have brothers. It didn't do.
Kind of do. I can't, to explain why
then
you
hire
needed to
twins. Then hire twins. There are plenty of twin actors out there. David Fincher did it in...
Maybe no twins wanted to work for the director, okay?
Valid point.
No, fuck this guy, honestly,
Nobody wants to fuck this guy. That is a fact.
But that's the thing, is that, that's the worst part about this movie, is that I couldn't focus on, the little minute details and the subplots and the subtext, because I was so distracted by how bad it was made. And whatever you want to say about this guy, and you can say whatever you want, he's supposed to be a good director. He's, Tarantino isn't a good person either, but he's a good director. Bryan Singer made at least good popcorn movies. There are plenty of... Harvey Weinstein, fuck that dude, but he was at least a decent producer. These people are at least supposed to be good at their job, as shitty and a front row ticket to hell that they have. But you're supposed to at least get this done. That's why he's still working. That's why Johnny Depp literally flew to Europe and took a pay cut to work with this piece of shit. It's because he's supposed to be a good director. So it makes me mad when I'm supporting this asshole to watch a good movie and I get this fucking turd.
Should have just illegally downloaded it like a normal person.
I already paid for you.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that this movie is so polarizing, because it really is. There are dedicated fans of this movie. There are people who have novels written about the symbolism in this movie and everything, and it's really interesting to me that people like Ben and I can watch this movie and be completely uninspired and completely turned off by it, and then there are people who have the complete opposite reaction. It's very interesting how certain movies in the world can cause that reaction. It's very fascinating to me.
The way I would describe it, because I get that, I totally see why you guys don't like it, because if I was to focus on those things, I'm pretty sure there was at one point I was rewatching it again after years, and I think I was really trying to focus on it as a film, which obviously you guys are, because why would you not? And I think as I was doing that, I was watching several scenes. I'm like, well, that's dumb, that's really dumb. What the fuck is going on here? But on account of me seeing it so many times, the way I would describe how I look at it, I'm not saying quality of film here, so Ben, don't blow a gasket. It's like if you have watched, say, any of the Avengers films, and you've watched them a couple of times, and you've watched them for the plot, to see what happens, all that, and you took it in and you loved it, whatever. Say you go back on your, like, 5th visit, but this time you're not watching it for the story. You're watching it to catch all the little Easter eggs that you missed the first few times. So you're not paying attention to the story, you're paying attention to all those little things and trying to piece them all together. That is pretty much how I watch this movie. It is no longer me watching a movie for the sake of watching how the story plays out, watching the performances or all that stuff. It is me knowing what the point is, knowing what the objectives of the film, and the object, what the character is meant to be doing, understanding what the engravings mean, and me trying to watch the film to pinpoint the moments that are in the engravings, in this whole thing, what they mean, how they are depicted in the film. That is kind of how I go into this film. And each time I watch it, that is what I do. And that's why each time I watch it, I catch something else that I didn't notice before, because I'm looking so intently for something, I notice something over there, and then, okay, I've already seen that one, so the next time I watch it, I'm looking over here, and then I see something over there. So that's how I go into the film. If that makes sense.
I think that you need to have that make sense to a certain degree on a first watch, though, because I would say with your comparison to, like, Avengers movies, you get the whole plot and you get the main nuances. Is that an oxymoron? You get the main nuances the first time you watch it through, and then the rewatches add some detail to that and some enrichment to that, but it doesn't change the overall effect of the film. It just adds to it. And I think with this movie, like, for example, to me, when he leaves the twins and the whole scaffolding falls down, I was like, why the fuck was that scene in there? This makes no sense. But now that you're talking about the engraving and the significance of it, as someone who read the book and watched the movie, I didn't pick up on that. And maybe that's just me being a dum-dum, but I just didn't, like, I would have never pieced that together. It just felt very out of place to me. And I think that says something about the way that the movie is structured for me personally.
I totally get that, but I mean, yeah, I was someone who picked up on a lot of things on the first watch. And that was because it's the same as when you watch a film and you get to the end and there's a plot twist, and suddenly things that you actually said to yourself, why did they do that? Why did they do that at the start of the film? When the twist is revealed at the end, those elements make sense. So for me, at the end of the film, when Balkan starts basically reading out how each engraving translates as this riddle and what it means, and basically this is which is to travel in silence by a long and circuitous route, to brave the arrows of misfortune and fear neither noose nor fire, to play the greatest of all games and win, foregoing no expense, is to mock the vicissitudes of fate and gain at last the key that will unlock the ninth gate. When you hear that, or at least for me, the first time, like, hang on, there are certain things that he said, and I'm immediately thinking of moments in the film that correlate to what has been said. So for me, that's always been the goal, is to translate that riddle and figure out where it is in the rest of the film. And I catch on really quick. I mean, there are moments that are subtle, moments that are a bit more symbolic, and then there are other moments in the film that literally are what is said in these engravings, like to play the greatest of all games. It's actually said in the film, and it's kind of a hint that when they're saying the girl, because that's all she's referred to in the film, if you look in the credits, she's just the girl. And still people are like, oh, is she a demon? Is she an angel? I'm like, no, she's the fucking devil. Some people don't get it, but that's fine. It's not really, I don't think, for some people it's not that clear, and that's fair enough. He is a fallen angel. He is a fallen angel, that is very true. But when they're in the plane and he's asking questions and he's just like, someone's playing a game with me, and she says, of course someone's playing a game with you, and you're starting to like it. That's literally what it is. Like, he's like saying that kind of haphazardly, but she's flat out telling him, yes, this is a game, you're playing it, and you're starting to enjoy it. Like, it's right there, and it's just like, wow, how did I miss that? That was actually the most literal thing to be said. But that's me.
I don't know, just like, I'm all about, like, literally the movie The Game, like, if the David Fincher film, trying to figure out if this is real or not. I love good mysteries and, like, putting pieces together, and movies with twists, like The Sixth Sense. Like, that's the thing, is that taking a twist out of a movie, the movie still needs to be good. And that's, like, a prime example. Like, the easiest example is The Sixth Sense. It's like, oh, you can go back and be like, oh, there's red here, they didn't talk here, they did this here. Like, you can piece it all together. And no, I'm never going to watch this movie again. But it's structured so poorly that the way, like, it's cool to compare, like, No Country and Ninth Gate, because No Country is, like, coming to a head, but then it veers off to the left, but it makes sense because that's real life. Like, when people get prepared for this big battle in movies, like, you know, they batten down the windows and like, you know, Home Alone, like, he gets all his traps ready, and at 9 o'clock, the wet bandits are going to show up, and he's going to be ready for them. That's what Llewellyn Moss does. He thinks is going to happen. Like, he's got his plan, he's got his gun, he's hidden the money away. Now he's just waiting for his wife and his stepmom to show up, or mother-in-law, and they're going to get away, and, like, he has this plan, but things don't go according to plan, and he dies because of it. But that, it doesn't add to anything in The Ninth Gate. Like, it's a big wet fart of a movie and an ending, and it's just, like, I don't know, there was no game for me. And I realized, like, there was a riddle, and, like, oh, people keep dying. Oh, by the way, the fucking lady that gets choked out in the wheelchair, what set director told her to do that face? Who told that actor to make that face, or who made that plastic mold of a face? No one makes that face when they get choked. Nobody. Like,
so I'm pretty sure the character in the book is not in a wheelchair, if I'm remembering correctly. So it was very interesting to me that they put this character. I don't know if the actress is wheelchair user or not, but I'm gonna assume that she's not, and that they put her in a wheelchair, and then just to, like, yes, have her have that face, which I felt like was straight out of, like, a Scary Movie, like the Scary Movie franchise, and then spin her into a fire. Like, I laughed at that scene so hard. Yeah. I was like, I feel terrible, but this is hilarious unintentionally.
That's the thing, is that it kept taking me out of the story. I was like, okay, people are dying because of these books. What's going on with these books? Why are they so important? Okay, I'll pay attention. And then you have shit like that. Or the guy hanging up, like,
hitting him on the back of the head, and the point of view of him going down onto the book. Like, I don't know why they chose to shot that scene like that. Like, I guess that it adds suspense because you don't know who does it, but I hated that.
Yeah, or just, like, it's just so funny that you were so bored in No Country for Old Men, but you'll take a 10-minute opening credit scene with worse CGI than Spawn, and then it literally takes 3 minutes for that person to sneak up on Johnny Depp one step at a time, and then just for, like, them, like, does he judo chop him? And
I have answers. Like, I honest to God, everything that you have an issue, I have an answer for why it's there, why it's done that way, whether it looks good or not. There is a really stupid reason behind it. Well, it's not stupid for me. But the reason, like you said, I can't say that anything you're thinking or feeling is wrong. Opinions are not wrong or right. We've established that. But it's because, for me, this film is a puzzle. My brain is attracted to puzzles. So if I see that, my brain is trying to piece it together. I mean, there are times when I watch a film and I go into puzzle mode like the fucking nun, and my puzzle brain lays out all the pieces and then says, there is no way any of these pieces go together, and then I get really pissed off, and that's how you get a Kill It With Fire review. But with this, I'm like, okay, I see this piece, I see, okay, yep, so I can see how the pieces fit together. I'm not saying that I visually like the open credits. I mean, it's too literal. Like, okay, we're going to show you nine fucking gates.
Do you get it? Do you get it?
McFly.
Right?
I agree that was a dumb way to do credits. You could have done credits in so many different ways. Hell, you could do like, oh god, like one of those things like Dead Silence where the opening credits are going on while you're watching the character of Mary Shaw carving and creating and constructing a doll. Hell, you could have, now I'm just getting really creative, you could have actually done like some really old footage as this is going on and show like Aristida Torquay creating the ninth gate.
So cool.
Hire me.
No, it's interesting because that critique of it being too literal is actually one of my chief complaints about the book, but not about the demon storyline and the devil raising storyline. It's about the Dumas storyline, because they literally tell you in the book, this person is Lady De Winter. This person is Athos. This person is D'Artagnan. And I'm like, yes, I know that. You don't have to tell me. Like, it was a little too literal for my taste in that storyline, and they kind of translate some of that to the movie, but then other things are very not literal.
Yeah. A lot of the film takes here's one thing that I find really weird. The director, because I avoid his name at all costs because it's like dirt in my mouth. He actually stated when picking the book to do as a film, he actually stated he does not believe in the occult, but he has an interest or fascination with the subject in films. And I'm just like, well, I feel like that's really backwards. Like, how are you going to give any real dedication or do something accurately if you have no interest in it or don't believe in it? That does not make much sense to me, especially because the occult is such a big theme in this movie. And it's almost like the way he was describing the occult, he wasn't really talking about the aspects of the supernatural or phenomena that is part of the occult definition. He was more looking at the part of the occult practices. Like, that's the part he was saying he doesn't believe in. I'm like, that makes absolutely no goddamn sense. That's the equivalent of saying, I don't believe in Christians. Like, the way that he phrased it, it's like, well, no, you can not believe in the faith and religious and the people, beings associated with Christianity, but to say that you don't believe in Christianity in the sense that, it's not real, it's like, I think millions and possibly billions of Christians in the world kind of say otherwise. It's just little things like that. But so many elements in the film, the story, the riddle, the engravings, the imagery in the film, which you wouldn't actually know is very little. It's taken from things like the arcana, so that's like tarot cards, and other things that are very spiritual, very pagan, and it takes imagery from that, and some of them is actually put into the engravings that weren't really used in the book version. And it's little things like that. And because I have a fascination with the arcana and all those type of things, there's like even a symmetry in using trigrams, and which is in layman's terms feng shui astrology. And I was hearing someone break that down, and I was so baffled and intrigued. Brittany, I'm actually going to send it to you because I don't know. You might find it interesting. On the other hand, you might go, what is this person talking about? But it was a fascinating reading. I stayed up reading it last night. They were the only person in the last decade I've ever heard anybody mention trigrams. Ben's probably going like, what the fuck is it?
It's always pentagrams.
Nobody talks about trigrams, and I've actually mentioned, I say to people and they're like, what the fuck's a trigram? And the fact that somebody was talking about this and breaking down the symbology of what they mean and then how it's represented in the film, I'm just like, somebody else knows they exist. And then I kind of started to love the film even more because I've got a trigram tattooed on the back of my neck and nobody knows what it is. I've had people go, why do you have a barcode on the back of your neck? I'm like, it's not a fucking barcode. Barcodes that don't even look remotely the same. But when you have an interest in the things that I do regarding the supernatural and you study those things and then you start to see the imagery used in the film, for me, it's a fascinating thing. My only criticism, and it's in regard to critiques of this film, because I don't care if somebody like Ben says that he absolutely loathes it. That's fine. I mean, I was surprised at how much he loathed it, but I don't care that he loathes it. It was that people criticized the film when they came to the understanding that the girl was the devil, because they were saying she can't be the devil because she's a woman.
No.
And therefore they hated the movie. I'm like, of all the reasons to hate it, that was the dumbest one.
Also, do you know how many forms Lucifer has taken in, like, historical texts and shit like that? Like, come on.
A bajillion? I think
Have
it's...
seen Bedazzled, the best movie ever? Elizabeth Hurley is an amazing devil.
I actually love Bedazzled.
That's how you tempt men, is you take the form of Elizabeth Hurley, and they will do whatever the hell you want. I will tell you that right now.
I mean, there are so many reasons. I mean, hang on, it's like, okay, so there literally is an illustration of the Whore of Babylon, which is associated with the Antichrist, but you definitely can't fathom that the devil could be a woman. I'm just like, why? And it's always men who are saying this. No offense to you, Ben, but it's always Christian men saying this. And if I was to believe in angels and demons and devils, I mean, to a degree, I do, but not in the Christian sense. If I was to believe in it from a Christian perspective and believe in Lucifer and Michael and God and all that stuff, then the way I would see it as, I do not believe that those beings would be restricted to gender. If
Do you know how many people got upset at Good Omens for having Michael played by a woman? So many people.
I remember the Kevin Smith film, Dogma. Everyone was really upset that God was Alanis Morissette.
God is also a woman in Good Omens.
See, I love that because I think if we are made, I'm getting so religious here, but if we're made in God's image, and we have men and women as the two set genders, obviously we have other genders, but if those are the two set genders, then why is God only one of them if we're made in His image? That doesn't make any.
That's why.
Exactly, and it's basically kind of what Ben just said in mentioning Dogma. I loved when Selma Hayek, who was playing Serendipity, who's a muse, and she's talking about how God is a woman, and they're just like, what are you talking about? And she says, all the people who wrote about God were men, so she became a he, depending on the gender of the person who was writing it. And I was just like, yep, that checks. So, I mean, I would rather listen to Ben, and even you, Brittany, criticize this film all day long, and list the technical reasons that you hated this film, because they make a lot of sense, and if I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But for somebody to say this is the dumbest fucking film ever because the devil is not a woman, to that person, I would just give them the finger. So that's my thoughts on that.
All right, Ashleigh, out of 5 stars, what are you gonna give The Ninth Gate?
I give The Ninth Gate 4 out of 5 because it is like a drug to my puzzle brain. Love it.
All right,
and
Brittany,
it's my favorite score.
First the book. What do you give the book? And then the movie, and then book to movie adaptation.
The book I give like a 3 out of 5 because I think it had some good potential and did not reach it, and I dislike the way a lot of things are written and the male gaze in the book. The movie, like a 1 out of 5. Sorry, Ashleigh.
Our friendship will survive this.
Okay, good.
And I'm gonna have to give it a half 0.5 out of 5. Simply, and the only reason I'm giving it that half star is because of the stuff Ashley said about some of the context clues and symbolism in it. But I can only give it a half star because you shouldn't have to be as passionate about the occult as you are, Ashley, to pick up on stuff in the movie. And that's what I don't like, is like when even simple stuff like Harry Potter or Hunger Games, like, well, this was in the book, and if you read, it's like, no, I'm watching the movie. I'm watching this movie, and if this movie cannot portray what it's trying to say, then it's bad. And I just feel like that's what this movie is. It's poorly made. I get what you're saying about the fun puzzle stuff, but it didn't portray the puzzle stuff correctly for me either. Like, I don't know. This movie was a huge miss for me.
As a person who's very passionate about books and book to movie adaptations, I think that's the biggest miss when it comes to book to movie adaptations, to chat about the theme of this episode, is that the movie should stand on its own without the book having to be consumed. And I think that watching the movie and then going back and reading the book should add layers to it. It should be like rewatching a film. It should add details to it and give you like some context that's not needed for the plot, but is fun to have. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of movie adaptations make, is that they change the core concept of the book so much that it's two completely different things, or it just loses the point of the book. I think 13 Reasons Why is a very good example of that for a lot of reasons.
So what do you give it out of 5 as a book to movie adaptation?
Oh, like a 0 or 0.5. It's a horrible movie adaptation. When you leave out an entire half the plot and the reason for the title of the book, I can't give it a higher score than that.
I completely understand that. I would say that after hearing everything that Ben and Brittany have said, that it's the reason I'm not giving the film a 5, because otherwise I will tend to, if I've seen something 100 times and I just love watching it, I'll just off the bat give it a 5 and not get critical about it because I love watching it, so I really don't care. But thinking from the things that they have said, that's knocked me down to a 4. But I will at least take credit that I bumped Ben up to a half instead of a full out 0. I will take that. I will wear that as a badge of honor.
I actually really enjoyed listening to your reasons for why you enjoyed this and your deep dive thoughts on it. And when I was reviewing other people's reviews of this film, because I was baffled by how anyone could like this, and reading through that and after listening to you, it does seem like that most people who understand this movie to the level that Ashleigh does and enjoys it to the level that Ashleigh does is for the reason that Ben said, that they understand the occult and they understand what the symbolism was trying to get if you're very steeply in the know of those things. And I even have a decent understanding of those things, and I still was not impressed. So you have to have such a deep level.
Well, I personally have once again loved talking about these two films. Ben said in the last one, I love talking about movies. Isn't
It's
that
fun.
What? It is fun, even if we don't agree, which it's going to happen one of these days.
It'll happen. It'll happen one of these days.
One of these days. Brittany, thank you so much for being our special guest, our expert guest, I like to say. Brittany does so many book marathons over on her personal channel, reading books, reviewing books. I don't know how she does it, because I can't do it. I couldn't do it. Seriously, I admire your reading capabilities. It's like a superpower, really.
Oh, thanks. It's funny you say that because there's so many other people in like the book community on like YouTube specifically who read like 30 books a month, and I'm like, how? I don't. I'm happy with like 5 to 6.
I thank Brittany for being a guest, and Ben, we have not figured out what our theme is for our next episode. We're going to have to work on that one.
Yeah. I'm excited though. Like I like the book to movie adaptation just because like there's so many in the horror comedy. So I guess we're gonna let you guys know what our next theme is gonna be, because like Ashleigh, I am very sleep deprived, so I can't really think of anything either.
It's gonna be a surprise for anybody wondering.
My passion for these two movies, hatred and love, have gotten me through this podcast. So after this, I'm gonna go take a nap.
A much deserved one, I would say. So, thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are catching this latest episode, and we really hope you enjoy it, and we would love some feedback on what your thoughts are on The Ninth Gate and No Country for Old Men if you have seen it or if you've read the book. And stay tuned for our next episode, whatever that theme may be, but that would be next month either way.
Thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks for having